cruel combat of major states' spheres of influence, where the most progressive achievements of human civilization were put to deadly use, and where human life had no value. It was spring of 1916. The weather on the Baltic Sea was good. No waves, no wind, only thick fog was standing over the surface. Russian battleship Siberian Archer was placing mines under the cold and severe waters off the eastern Germany coast. The headquarters order was to prevent German ships from attacking Russian ports. Two strong sailors were dropping off one of the last 500-kilogram mines under the command of the midshipman when Sergei Timur, the first captain assistant, approached the watch. So, he asked the midshipman, "You know, it's foggy, and we haven't received any signals from Sentry and Hunter for quite a while," was the answer. Those were two other Russian ships performing the same task. Timur frowned, ordered to resend the signal, and went to report to the captain. He found the first-rank Captain Kolchak in his office examining maps and drinking tea. Kolchak was a tall, middle-aged man whose temples were already touched with grey. His face expressed dignity and concern. The two officers talked a bit and showed each other presents they got from wives, which reminded them about home. A safe and dear place away from this cruel, bloody war. Suddenly, a lieutenant rushed in and asked to quickly come to the bridge. Several officers were already standing there when the captain came. A huge battleship was already visible through the fog. She was going right at them, and they could see tiny sailors and hear a distant bell ringing on her deck. "She's German," said one of the lieutenants. The captain looked at the enemy ship through his binoculars and acknowledged, "This is Friedrich Karl." "So much for a Sentry and Hunter," said Timur disappointedly. "We've missed them," admitted Kolchak, watching the German slowly turning her heavy 210mm cannons towards them. A moment later, the cannons roared and furiously spat out enormous clouds of dark grey smoke mixed with fire. Two shells hit the water right in front of the place where the Russian officers were standing, splashing them all over. When to the skin, the captain commanded all hands to battle stations. "All to fighting stations!" bellowed Timur through a mechanical megaphone. The bell was already ringing on the deck, calling the crew to arms. Kolchak himself, together with Timur, hurried to the wheelhouse. The order was full speed ahead. Sailors were running on the deck back and forth, performing officers' orders, in the middle of outrageous roaring, splashes, and griding of iron torn apart by deadly shells. There were already several centers of fire on the ship's deck, which the sailors were trying to put out. It's good they had got rid of the mines. Siberian Archer's cannons finally started to shoot back, but only one of them was big enough to compete with Friedrich Karl's armament. Suddenly, the ship, which was rushing ahead at full speed, running away from the German, started to slow down without an obvious reason. Furious, Kolchak went to the deck to find out what had happened, and there a sailor from the engine shop, whose clothing and skin were badly burned, but who nevertheless didn't pay attention to pain, ran up to him and reported, "Your Excellency, a shell. It hit the pipes in the engine shop. It will take not less than half an hour to repair them." 15 minutes, ordered Kolchak, and the sailor ran back to his post. The ship had completely stopped. "Alexander Vasilievich, in 15 minutes they will have turned us into a sieve," remarked Timur. "Yes, we're a sitting duck," admitted Kolchak and disappeared in the wheelhouse. Meanwhile, the fierce bombardment of Siberian Archer, which was now standing still, continued. The situation was not optimistic at all, and it became even worse when a shell hit the shield of the Russian ship's only big cannon, situated on a 4-meter tower. The captain again went to the deck to find out why they had ceased fire, when the next shell exploded only a couple of meters from him. Confused, Kolchak fell down. A minute later, he, as if through a wall of water, saw the worried face of Timur, who was standing over him and calling him by the name, as if from a huge distance. With Timur's help, the captain unsteadily stood up and ordered him to take command of the ship. He looked up at the manless cannon above his head and silently started to climb the ladder. On the platform, two blood-stained sailors were lying motionless. One of them was obviously dead, but the other happened to be still alive. The cannon's shield had saved him. "Gurov, are you alive?" asked the captain, pushing him. "Charge! Charge!" The shell-shocked sailor uttered a moan and started to move. Kolchak took up the cannon. He was watching the enemy ship coming closer and closer, her cannon ceaselessly firing. He heard, as if through pads of cotton in his ears, shouting of officers and moans of wounded sailors on the deck washed with bloody water. The captain's shot was the only chance for all of them. Kolchak gathered all his concentration and aimed the cannon at the enemy ship's wheel tower. The blood-stained sailor sitting behind him had already charged the cannon and was now holding the firing cord. "Fire!" said the captain and plugged his ears. The sailor pulled the cord. Timur was on the deck, watching the enemy ship through his binoculars. He saw their wheel tower explode. The Germans started to lose speed. The captain climbed down just to hear the report that the pipes in the engine shop had been repaired. But the captain's shot only saved them from immediate death. The Germans certainly had a reservable tower which they were about to use, and this wasn't the worst news. Their own minefield was in front of the Russian ship, and the way home was blocked by Friedrich Karl. The only way out was to lure the German onto the mines, which meant they had to enter the minefield now and hope that the enemy who didn't know about the mines would follow. And so was the captain's order. The whole crew was knelt on the starboard deck, their caps removed. The captain was also knelt ahead of everyone, holding a prayer book in his hand and reading a prayer aloud, while Siberian Archer was crossing the minefield at full speed. The German had already recovered from the damage and was now again racing after the Russian ship, continuously shooting. Several times Siberian Archer was countable centimeters from bumping into a mine. Luckily she wasn't very heavy, and many mines were too deep underwater to hit her bottom. "Mine port side!" they heard the cry of the lieutenant who was watching the water on the ship's course. A mine, whose chain had probably been turned by a German shell, had come to the surface. They were already on the very edge of the minefield, but the last mine blocked their way, and it was impossible to pass it without a complete stop and making a reverse. The captain ordered to do so. Siberian Archer carefully reversed past the mine, which was floating only a meter away from her board. "We've passed the mine," said the captain with relief, and turned his eyes back at the German ship. How close she was now! She had just entered into direct flame area, where one volley was enough to destroy the Russian ship. "Now everyone's here," admitted the captain, looking straight at the enemy's main 210mm cannon already pointed at them. A second later it will shoot, and its firing barrel will be the last thing he will see in his life. He preferred to meet his death looking it in the eye. "Adieu, fellas," muttered one of the sailors. "Now she will finish us," uttered the lieutenant. Timur was silently praying, holding his wife's icon. And an explosion followed, but the one bringing salvation instead of death. A huge blast from somewhere underwater hit the German's port side. The ship leant right, and a tremendous explosion from somewhere inside her tore the iron off the board, probably at the end of Friedrich Karl's arsenal. A second later, the main cannon also exploded. "We've passed the minefield," said the captain with a smile. His crew members were crying with joy, throwing their caps up and embracing each other. And while the cold Baltic waters were accepting the burning remains of Friedrich Karl, the Russian seamen steered the course for home.